This
About.
conference will now be recorded.
So I think we completed bitwise operators, logical operators, relational operators, and I think we need to talk about uh, the compound assignment operators and the increment operators. Okay, and then we will go into the conditional operations. Now, first of all, let us finish the operators section here. So operators we will complete, and we will talk about control statements. We'll talk about the control statements. So the next operators that we are going to talk about are the compound. I think compound assignment operators I told. One second. Yeah, compound assignment operators completed, right? Okay. So we will talk about increment and decrement operators. So increment and decrement operators. So basically, what are these operators? So increment operator means the operator which increases the operator that increases the variable value by one only. Okay. So the operator that increases the variable value by one only. Okay. So what is the operator here? So operator is plus plus operator. Okay. So plus plus operator. So what is this? So this is the plus plus operator. So plus plus is the operator which is going to increase the value by 1. Okay. Now we will have
Notepad is not visible.
okay. So we are talking about increment and decrement operator. So increment operator means the operator that increases the variable value by 1 only. So which is called as plus plus operator, and we also have the decrement operator. So how the decrement operator will look like here? So decrement operator means the operator, okay, so operator that decreases the value. So that decreases the value by one only. Okay. So that operator will be minus minus. Okay. So minus minus operator. Okay. So minus minus operator is the operator which will decreases the value by one. Okay. So these operators comes in two forms. These operator comes in two forms. So first is, okay, each of these operators I should say. So each of these operators will come in two forms. So first one is post and next one is pre. Okay, otherwise I'll say post increment and post decrement, and here pre increment. Okay, otherwise I'll write pre increment and post decrement. Post decrement. So like this, so we will look at post increment and post decrement. Next we will write post increment and post decrement. So this is the way that we look at these operators. So first we will talk about post increment and pre increment. Okay, so post increment. So post increment. So the syntax is operate, operand, operand plus plus. Okay, so operand plus plus, and at the same time, so if you are going for pre-increment, so if you are going for pre-increment, so the operand will be something like this. So plus plus operator. So your operator is nothing but the variable value. Okay. Same thing with the decrement if you go for. So same thing with the decrement if you go for. So the decrement will be, so the decrement will be something like post decrement and here pre-decrement. Post decrement and pre decrement. So post decrement means operand minus minus, and here I will say minus minus operand. Okay, so post decrement, pre decrement. Okay, so then what is the meaning of each of these things we will understand. So now first we will go for the examples. So first we will talk about the post increment. So how the post increment will work. Okay, so post increment. So post increment means, so here one more thing that you need to know here is this post increment we generally call it as, okay, so we generally call it as unary operation. Okay, so post increment we generally call it as unary operation. So what exactly is unary operation? So unary operation means, remember now for example, if I'm saying x1 is equal to 5. Now, what is x1 here? x1 will take up the value 5. So, at the same time, minus x1 will take up the value minus 5. Means x1 will hold the value. So, x1 will hold the value 5. X1 will hold the value 5. So, minus x1 will hold the value minus 5. So, x1 will hold the value 5. So minus x1 will hold the value minus 5. Means the unary operation basically, so the unary operation will take up a value. Okay, so at the same time, this also is a unary operation. So unary operation will take up a value as I'm saying. So when I'm saying unary operation will takes up a value. Now for example, if I am saying, okay, so operand means something like x1 is equal to 5. So I'm saying x1 is equal to 5, and I will say x1 plus plus. So x1 plus plus is the operation. So what is the meaning of this operation first of all? The meaning of this operation is going to be x1 is equal to x1 plus 1. Okay, so meaning of this operation is x1 is equal to x1 plus 1. So here x1 is holding up a value, at the same time x1 plus plus will also hold a value. Okay, so that is what is the meaning. So this is the operation. So operation will also hold a value. So x1 value is 5. x1 is how much here? x1 is equal to x1 plus 1, which is nothing but 5 plus 1. So what is 5 plus 1 here? 5 plus 1 is going to be 6. Okay, so what is this value here? So the value is going to be 6. Whose value is going to be 6? x1 value is going to be 6. But here x1 plus plus value will be 5 only. It will get the previous value. Okay, so it will get the previous value. Okay, so in that way the x1 plus plus value will be 5 and x1 value will be 6. X1 value will be 6. So in this way you are looking at the value of x1 plus plus. At the same time you're also looking at the value of x1 plus plus. Okay, so x1 plus plus, and at the same time you're also looking at the value of x1 also. So you are looking at the value of x1 also. So that's the way we look into that. Now, for example, I am running it. Okay, so simply what is this? So simply it is going to be. So simply it is going to be. So simply it is going to be what? So simply it is going to be x1 6, x1 plus plus is going to be 5. So x1 value or ultimately will get increased. Okay. So simply it is 5 plus 1, which is going to be 6. X1 value has become 6, but x plus plus value is 5. X plus plus value is 5. Okay. So now let's say I am running the operation once again. I'm running the operation once again. Say x1 plus plus I am saying. So again x1 plus plus is nothing but what? Again x1 plus plus is nothing but x1 is equal to x1 plus 1. Okay. So x1 plus 1 again what is x1 value? X1 value is 6. So 6 plus 1. So 6 plus 1 is going to be 7. But what this will get? So this will get the previous value. What is the previous value? The previous value is going to be 6. Okay. Now for example, if I'm saying again if I'm saying x plus, right? So this will be x1 is equal to x1 plus 1. So what is x1 value here? 7 plus 1, it is going to be 8. So x1 value is going to be 8 and this value will become 7. Okay. So in that way you are going to get the values of the post increment. So this concept is known as the post increment. So you are incrementing post means the value you are incrementing and then you are getting its so getting its value updated. Okay, so getting its value updated. So in that way you are looking at the things. Okay, so yeah, in that way you are looking at the things of the post increment. Okay, so post increment. Now for example, if I am trying to get it over here, one second. Okay, right. So let me go for x1 is equal to 5. Okay, otherwise all at once we will do. So next we will go for the pre-increment. So what does pre-increment tell us? So pre-increment will tell you that, so in the pre-increment what happens is, so you will have something like, say x2, x2 plus plus x2 basically. So plus plus x2. So what is the meaning of plus plus x2 here? So plus plus x2 is nothing but x2 is equal to x2 plus 1. Okay, so x2 is equal to x2 plus 1. So x plus plus x2 is nothing but x2 is equal to x2 plus 1. So here if you observe, so let's say x2 is equal to something like 8. Okay. So and you have plus plus x2 operation. So what does plus plus x2 operation will do? So it will increase the value by 1. Same. So x2 is equal to x2 plus 1. Okay. So 8 plus 1. So what is x2 value I told you? So x2 value is 8 and you will also get a value into plus plus x2. So what value you get into plus plus x2 here? So the value you get into plus plus x2 will be same as the x2 value. Will be same as the x2 value. So it will not get the previous value. So in the previous case, it used to get the previous value, but it will get the same value over here. Okay, so in that way we are looking at the things. Again, if you are doing the same operation, something like uh, plus plus x2, if we are doing it second time, so this is first time, second time we are doing same thing, x2 is equal to x2 plus 1. So what is x2 here? X2 is nothing but 9 plus 1. So 9 plus 1 is going to be 10. So x2 value is going to be 10 and at the same time plus plus x2 value also is going to be 10. So in this way you are looking into So you are looking into the pre-increment. So you are looking into pre-increment. So that's how you will look at the pre-increment basically. Okay, so that's how we are looking at the things. So here, so we will talk about the uh, okay. So here we will talk about the increment and decrement of increment operator. So we will make it 5, sorry, so and we will make it 9. Okay. So now let's say system dot out dot println. So system dot out dot println. So I will say x1 and I will say x1 plus plus. So x1 plus plus. Okay. So 5 times we will write. So x1 plus plus and here also x1 plus plus and finally x1. So what I told you, x1 is nothing but what? X1 is nothing but the 5 value. Okay, so what about x1 plus plus here? So x1 plus plus is equal to x1 value will get increased. So x1 value will get increased, but x1 plus plus will be 5 only. So will be 5 only. So whose value will be 6? So the x1 value will become 6. Okay, so here also again, if you observe, so here the value will be 6, but here the value would be 7. Okay, so in which way you are doing it? So you are doing it, okay, so something like this. So 5, so x1 is 5 obviously. X1 plus plus means x value will increase, but x1 plus plus value will be the same. So here x1 value will get increased, okay, so but x value x1 1 plus plus, I mean x1 plus plus will be the same. So in that way you are looking at, okay, so the value. So looking at the value. So that's how we are looking at the uh, I mean post increment. So at the same time, we'll have the pre increment in the same way. Now, if we are going for, so now if we are going for, okay, let it open. So when we are going for the pre and the post decrements, okay, so pre and the post decrement. So let's understand those things now. So we will click on here. So when we are looking at post increment and pre increment, so post increment means, so you will have something like x1 minus minus. Okay, so x1 minus minus. X1 minus minus deals with what? So x1 is equal to x1 minus 1. Okay, so x1 minus 1. So for example, you have, say, so for example, you have x1, but here this time it will go on 1 minus. Okay. Now let's say I have 8. So x1 minus minus. So x1 8 means x1 minus minus will do what? So x1 is equal to x1 minus 1. So what is x1 value here? 8. 8 minus 1 is going to be 7. So x1 is going to be 7 and x1 minus minus will get the previous value 8. Again you do the operation, this will become 6 and this will become 7. Okay, so previous one. Again you are doing the operation here, this will become 5 and this will become 6 because the previous operation. Okay, so previous value. So in that way the things will go on. Okay, so things will go on. So whenever I am talking about the post increment, so whenever I'm talking about the post increment, so in this way you are looking at the post decrement side. So post decrement. So at the same time, when you are going for the post, I mean pre-increment, same thing here. So this is plus plus. So you are getting the value 55667. Okay. So this is your post increment. So at the same time, we will work with, okay. So x2. I think there is some issue with that. Okay. So there is some issue with this. Okay, let me open a new text file and we will save this as demo.java. Okay, so demo.java. So demo.java, so save it. So this time, okay, so otherwise operators, so operators.java, save it. What is happening here? So operators.java. Okay, so here generally we write a class operators. Okay, so spelling of operators this one. So when we are talking about the operator, so we need to have public static void main, and then we are having int x1 is equal to 5, and we will say int x2 is equal to 8. So x1 is equal to 5, x2 is equal to 8, and here I will say system.out.println. So x1 value, and same thing here. So we will say so x1 plus plus. Okay, so x1 plus plus. So and this time here x1 plus plus, and okay, so once we run this, okay, so you are going to get the answer. So let me close these things. Yeah. So what we see as the answer here, so 5, 5, 6, 6, 7. So x1 is going to be 5 as we know it. So x1 plus plus means it will increase the value of x1, but increase the value of x1, but the value remains the same. And x1 means the value as it got increased. So we have, so x1 plus plus, it will increase the value of x1, but the value still remains 6. Okay, and finally the value got increased, so it will be 7. Okay, so in that way you are looking at the post increment operator. So post increment operator. So these are so post increment. So post increment operator. Okay, so I'll just round it up at the end. So post increment. So post increment operations. Okay, so these are the post increment operations. And at the same time, we will look at pre increments. And the pre increment, so we are looking at x2. Okay, so x2 value. Okay, so here we will say x2, or I will say plus plus x2. Okay, so plus plus x2. So here I will print only x2 value. So here I will print. So these are very, very important operators. Okay, so x2 plus plus, and here I will say x2. So now just save this. Okay, so run the code. Yeah. So what operation that you can see over here? 8, 9, 9. So x2 is 8 as we know it. So as we incremented, the value will be incremented, x2 will be incremented, and plus plus x2 also will get incremented. So same thing. So here what we are going for, so we are going for x2 value is 9. So plus plus x2 will be 10, and this also will be 10 because both are incremented. So both are incremented. So in that way you are looking at the both incrementation. So this is pre-increment. Okay, so pre-increment, the values are this. Okay, so pre-increment, and at the same time we will have post-decrement. So post-decrement means, so we will have so post-decrement means, so we will have something like x2. Okay, so let's say x1 only. So x1, and we will go for x1. Okay, so x1 minus minus. Okay, so x1 minus minus, and here you will have x1 value, and here you will have x1 plus plus again. Okay, and now we will look at the values. Okay, sorry, x1 minus minus. Okay, so and here finally we will have x1. So simply run this and go to run Java. So what you are finding here? So you are finding x1 value is 5, and you are doing x1 minus minus, as you are doing x1 minus minus over here. So when you are doing x1 minus minus over here, so x1 value will get decreased, but x1 value still is 5. Okay, so x1 value will get decreased, but x1 minus minus still will be 5. Okay, so this value already decreased to 4. And when you are saying x1 minus minus, x1 value is decreased to 3, but x1 minus minus value will be still the 4. Okay, so that's how you are looking at the things over here. Okay, so this is post decrement. Only post, what is the difference between post increment and post decrement? So the only thing is, so you are doing uh, you are doing the minus here. Okay, so minus 1. Okay, so then comes to the pre-decrement. So what does the pre-decrement tell you? So x2, or else I will say minus minus x2 here. So minus minus x2. So when we are looking at minus minus x2, so minus minus x2 means what? So this also will decrease the value. Okay, so x2 is equal to x2 minus 1. Okay, so x2 minus 1. So when you are looking at the x2 value, let's say x2 value is something like 8. Okay, so if you are going for minus minus x2, so what is minus minus x2 will tell you? So x2 is equal to x2 minus 1. So x2 is equal to x2 minus 1. So what is x2 value? So 8 minus 1. So 8 minus 1 is going to be 7. So x2 is equal to 7, and at the same time minus minus x2 also will be 7. So again you are doing the operation, so this will become 6, and this also will become 6. Again you are doing the operation, this will become 5, and this also will become 5. So in that way you are going to have the operations. Okay, so same thing here. So if we are doing minus minus, okay, so this time I will say x2. So x2 here, so x2, and this time I will go for minus minus x2. So here I will print x2. So here I will say minus minus x2 again. Okay, so and finally I will print the x2 value. Okay, so in this way you are looking at those values. So let me just save this and run it back again. So what is the x2 value here? So x2 value is going to be 8 minus minus x2. So minus minus x2 means the x2 value changed and it will be stored in minus minus x2 also. Okay, so then what is the value of x2? The value of x2 is 7. Okay, so the value of minus minus x2 will be decreased value. Okay, so what is the value of x2 here? So value of x2 is also 6. Okay, so in this way, you are looking at the operators, the increment and the decrement operators. Okay, so increment and the decrement operators. So finally, we are looking at pre-decrement. Okay, so pre-decrement. Okay, so in this way, you are looking at the pre-decrement operator. Okay, so pre-decrement operator. Okay, so these are very very important operators. So we will be looking at these things clearly when we are going for loops and all those kind of things. Okay. Now what I'll do here is so we will introduce. Okay, so we'll just introduce the control statements. So what are control statements? So up to now, you are doing the programs in such a way that so you are doing the programs in such a way that so you are okay. So you are doing the programs in such a way that so you are going for sequential control. Okay, so sequential control means the control of the program is going in a sequence. Okay, so it's going in a sequence. Okay, so it's going in a sequence. Now generally, how I'm calling it as a sequence and all because my control is flowing. Okay, so control. So first of all, we'll talk about the control. So control is nothing but the cursor or a pointer. Okay, so what is control here? Control is nothing but a cursor or a pointer that will will execute the code that will execute the code. Okay, so the control, the cursor or a pointer that will execute the code. Execute the code. Okay, so generally the control flow in a sequence. Generally the control flow in a sequence. So generally the control flow in a sequence. Okay, so in a sequence. So for example, so simple example. So we can take our last program. Okay, so you can take our last program only. So let me. Okay, so otherwise we will take even a simple example so that will not complicate the things. So x1 plus x2, x1 minus x2, and then I will say x1 into x2, and then so then I will go for okay. So this is enough. Okay, so we are going for x1 into x2. Now, when you look at this, so when you look at this program, so if you just look at this program, so our control, so the control of the program, okay, so control of the program always selects the main. So control of the program always selects the main, and coming into the main, it will allocate x1 value. So then it goes to the next line, so which is x2 value. So what is x2 value? 8. Then it goes to the next line x1, it prints x1 plus x2. So what is x1 plus x2 here? So 5 plus 8. So 5 plus 8 is going to be 13. So it will print 13 over here. Then it will go to the next. So it will say system dot out println x1 minus x2. x1 minus x2. So x1 minus x2 means 5 minus 8. So the answer is going to be minus 3. So here you will get minus 3. So then x1 into x2. So x1 into x2 means 5 8 40. Okay, so you have 40. So we have these values. Okay. So when you are going for x1, x2, so you are having those values, okay, and those values are making the calculations done. So x1 plus x2, okay, so x1 minus x2, okay, so x1 into x2. So we are making the calculations done. Okay, so that's how we are looking at the sequential flow of control. So sequential means the control always starts from main and it goes in a sequence by default. So generally the control flow in a sequence. Okay, so generally the control flows in a sequence by default. Okay, so by default. So by default, how the control flows? If somebody asking you, so you should say it will flow in a sequence by default. Okay, so the control flow can also can also can also go according to the following types. According to the following types. So what is the following types? So first, conditional control flow statements. So conditional control flow statements. So under the conditional control flow statements, you have if structures. Okay, so you have so under conditional control flow, you have if structures. So you have switch structures, switch structure, and you have conditional operator, conditional operator, or you also call it as ternary operator. Okay, so you also call it as ternary operator. Okay, so conditional operator, or you can also call it as ternary operator. So that is how we take up conditional control flow structure. So then you have loop based control flow statements. Loop based control flow statements. So loop based control flow statements wherein you have, okay, so under the loop based control flow statements, so you have while loop, so while loop, and you have a do while loop, so you have a do while loop, and you have a for loop, so you have a for loop, and you have nested loops. Okay, so nested loops. Okay, so you have for loop and you have nested loops, and then finally we will look into unconditional statements or jump statements. Unconditional statements are jump statements. Unconditional statements are jump statements. So where we look at break and continue. So break and continue. So we are going to look at so the break and continue. So whenever we are talking about the break and continue, so we are going to talk about the jump statements or unconditional statements. So these are the things that we are going to talk about So we are going to talk about in. So we'll have a break, okay, and then we will go for continue. So break and continue here. So these are the two jump statements or unconditional statements. So we will start our journey into the structures, okay, structures, structure, and all this. Okay, so this is the main heart of the logic. Okay, so once you are clear with this, so we will have some examples. Okay, and I'll also give you tasks. Okay, so every day I'll be giving you some tasks also. So I want you to finish them. So, so this will help you in understanding the logics better. So if you are perfect in this, so your logics will become perfect. Okay. So that is what we will be doing from tomorrow. So we will be solving some problems and I will be giving you some tasks also. Okay. So that's it for today. So we will meet tomorrow with more underst- understanding of these things. Okay. Yeah, so hopefully you all understood today's session. If you have any doubts, any questions, you can ask me right now. Yeah, any questions, any doubts? Yeah, any questions, any doubts? If you have, Sai Charan, Swapna, you can ask me.
No doubt, sir.
Okay, fine. So we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay.